first of all, let me introduce you.
Thank you.
Grant Tosner, former football player, and now you start at the bottom. You've worked your way back up, and now you've got this great business, and you're coaching, and you're helping improve people's lives, building that momentum. Why don't you give us a little bit more info and some more details on that, and how your journey began, and kind of how you got here.
Well, I hope we only got an hour, because it could be a long one. I could tell you that now.
I know. I'm the same way. Give me the 2-minute version.
Okay, 2-minute version. So left school, went and played football. That didn't work out. Got injured. You know the story. Young kid aspires to be a professional footballer. Didn't quite work out. Didn't really know what to do. Fortunately for me, my uncle was a trader in the city, and he was basically like, "Come to the city. Like, you don't have anything to do. You don't have a job. Just come and see if you like it." Didn't have a clue. I didn't know anything about the city. I didn't know anything about stock markets or the financial sector or anything. I'd literally spent 5 years kicking a football around a pitch. So I was super green. Went into the city, admin role, worked my way up. You know how the city can catch you. It's a bubble, right? You get sort of hooked in, and before you know it, 10 years has gone past. And, you're kind of looking back thinking, is this really what I want to do? And not give you a sob story, my granddad passed away. And that was kind of like the moment where I took a step back and kind of, asked myself if this was the life that I really wanted. And so made the decision to qualify as a personal trainer, and literally walked into my boss's office, said, "Here's my resignation. I'm leaving." Parents told me, don't do it. Friends told me, don't do it. But it was just something that I felt like I had to do. And fast forward 10 years, here I am, coach, lifestyle coach, and I've worked pretty hard. It's been a pretty hard journey, I'll tell you that now. But definitely worth it. Definitely worth it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So it's always interesting, and I always like to hear people's origin stories, because it's like, and actually this ties into the conversation, and so we can pivot into that I was just having, in terms of like, we are in a society where, and I say society, I mean, I'm in the U.S., people all over the world, though, I feel kind of, feel this in some degree, like, where it's like, if you could just make enough money, all your problems will be solved. And that becomes the main focus from like day one for so many people, including, their parent, depending on the parents you get, the school you go to, your peers, what they're focused on, the media, then it all becomes, then you start putting yourself in a box, and you're like, okay, well, I'm this, and if I'm going to be happy and make money, I need to make money, and I need to do this, and this is who people tell me I am and what I'm good at. And that's like literally the opposite way you want to go, because what happens is stuff like with you, and it took you, in a way, obviously it was a tragic event, but it was a very fortunate event, in my opinion, when people are kind of woken out of this like false and this miswanting that they go through whole lives experience.
I think a lot of it is down to how we're taught. I don't know really how the US school system works, but I know that in England we're not really taught about how to deal with money, or how to handle debt, or how to build a business, or any of the things that when you leave school, all of those things you need to have skills in. And so I feel like a lot of the reason why, a lot of people feel like money will fix their problems is because they don't actually understand what's attached to earning a lot of money, if that makes sense. Like my whole motivation, because I grew up, my family, we didn't have money. And when you're young, you don't realize you don't have money. You just, you're thankful for what you've got. It's only once you get a little bit older, you realize, oh, wait a minute. Like, okay, we were kind of like on the breadline. Mum was working really hard, and I didn't realize what she was doing for me. So the motivation for me working in the city was purely based on money. It was, I've got to earn enough money to help my family. I've got to earn enough money to help my friends. I've got to earn enough money to, pay my parents' bills. So a lot of the motivation for me being in the city was 100% all about earning money. And it kind of destroyed me in a way.
So this is let's focus on this. I always love. I never know where I'm going to go with my guests, but we're totally in alignment here, and I want to kind of focus on this piece for a little bit. So, I mean, you are preaching to a choir that's with you. I scream from the rooftop. I mean, one of my main goals in life is to change the educational, just the basic educational system in terms of what's taught. And so let's start with that. Like you opened up by talking about how in England, you're like, I don't know how it is in the States, but they don't teach you basic things like how to balance your checkbook and grow and grow your wealth. But then they also, emotional intelligence, how to get along with others. Relationships 101 in terms of like, and then these other areas I talk about, these behind me, these 5 cores, which are your mindset, your career and your finances, your relationships, your physical health, your emotional health, and giving back. And the career and finance, the career part is really what's focused on in the schooling system, right? In terms of like getting you ready to eventually go on. But even that is broken because, again, they just focus on the, let's get you into as high a paying job as possible versus, all right, let's really dive into what makes you as a human being and what's actually going to make you happy long term, and what are your strengths, what are your passions, how do we put that together? Instead, it's just like it's a bread factory and you're just going through the line. And this stems back to, this is the last 100 years, the school system in terms of just the curriculum that's taught. And it was back when, and we started to have factories, and it was like, okay, just get them ready to be factory workers. But that's not how life is anymore. And we're still in that way of going about things, of preparing people. So it's like, yes, math and, algebra and science and history, all these things are important. But if you're learning, if you're in a geometry 3 trig 2.0 class using a TI-82 calculator, that's what it was when I was there. Maybe it's TI-95 by now. I don't know.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You're never going to pick up again.
No.
Versus like, hey, okay, here's the basic stuff of what makes you happy as an individual. Let's get into that, and let's instill that in the and our public school. Some private schools in the States are starting to do a better job, especially on the emotional intelligence side, and like helping kids be like, hey, let's identify your emotions. Let's, what are the emotions of kids, and because that's a huge part of happiness, but it's just still so ignored. It sounds like it's the same way where you are.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like, even if we kind of come back to like my whole business ethos, it's everyone at the minute is trying to enter their learning curve like halfway through. And I feel like that's kind of where, everybody is in life. There's no real back to basics. And, I've started reading a lot of books. I wasn't really one for reading books, but I've learned so much from reading books. And I know people always tell you, and philanthropists and business advisors always say, read books. But I understand now why the system is the way it is. And I understand why people don't have this basic level of understanding. And a lot of it's because, coming back to the schools, it's how we're taught. We're not taught to think for ourselves. We're taught to just recite and remember stuff in books and then write it down in an exam, and then you leave school and you've spent X amount of years learning that way, and then you leave school and you go for a job interview and they ask you nothing about what you've spent the last 15 years studying. So, I think the transition for me going into the city was kind of like my 10, 12 years of learning about how the world really worked, because I was green, like I was clueless. But the education for me started there. I worked with a lot older people. I was 17, 18, and fortunately for me, I got someone to sort of take me under their wing and show me the ropes. And I feel like that's where a lot of people just don't have that. They just don't have that guidance of someone who can, grab them and just start from the bottom and show them how it's done.
Totally right. I mean, having whatever you want to call it, a mentor or whatever. Parents are like the number one. You're born, and it's like they're gods, and with credit cards, and they can buy you your favorite toys, and and they're putting a roof over your head and whatnot. And they're not bad. Nobody's bad, but if they grew up with these same types of
Yeah.
failure habits and thoughts, and this is what they're focused on, and then they instill that in you. I mean, it's this failure loop that we're caught in. And just going
Yeah,
back to something
absolutely.
you were saying earlier, not only when you were saying like, you're, it's all about like the grades that you get and retaining information, and some, and then you come out, and then that's kind of has nothing to do with the world you were saying. But I think an important piece that people forget about is that, like, because everybody's brain is completely unique and we're all different, like when we're basing people's worth and intelligence and like, because it's all about grades, right? And what are grades
Yeah.
based? Your ability to like retain information. But certain people don't, their brains don't work that way. But they may be
No.
the next Elon Musk or, whatever.
Yeah.
Like they may change the world. But if they're very quickly pegged as you're a failure, you don't get good grades, there's something wrong with you. I mean, unless they have somebody like a mentor or some outside force to kind of be like, no, that's all bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
you can do whatever the hell you want. Let's figure out what you're awesome at, and let's go with that. They're screwed, and then their whole life they're just kind of like hovering above rock bottom. I call it. Where it's like kind of you're not suicidal, maybe sometimes, that you're not elated to be alive. You maybe have some good moments in life, but you're kind of this typical, I call it a fixed victim, like just waiting for something great to happen to you.
Yeah.
A lot of it is poor me. My brain is broken. There's not much to do about it. Type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, just it's good that you've touched on that, because I feel like a lot of people, don't realize what it is that they're not necessarily good at, but I feel like a lot of people don't know how to learn. They don't know their best way to learn, because like you said, they've spent so long in the system. I'm a visual learner. So, and I've learned that over the years, that academically I was always good, but it just bored me. Reading and writing, it just bored me. But if I saw something, I could pick it up a lot quicker than if I read about it. And that was partly the reason why I did so well in the city, because a lot of it is on the job learning and watching what people do. And I didn't go to uni. I didn't get degrees in finance or anything like that. I, as an individual, learned and then just applied that into my life. I think a lot of people genuinely don't know their best sort of asset in terms of,
right,
can I read well? Can I write well? Am I good on video? How do I learn the best? I think people genuinely don't know. And so they're constantly clamoring for this, kind of, like you said, hope that something falls in their lap and it changes their life. And the harsh reality of it is it just doesn't work like that. You need to know what you're good at, and you need to pursue it with everything you've got.
Totally, man. I love that. I mean, that's well said. And the visual learning piece, I guess I knew that, but I like how you kind of put that, because to me, it's not just you. Okay.
Yeah.
As a world, with what's going on with technology and these quantum leaps in science and tech, that now, at any given moment, you've got your phone, you've got, your TV that's got 8 different streaming things, you've got your computer, people multi-screening. Attention span's going down. I mean, ADD is a thing that I personally believe, the majority of people have at least some bit of it. I think there's different levels. I'm definitely a higher level on that.
Me too.
And, I'm a visual learner as well. And the more I think about it, like, you look at things like TikTok and Instagram, like we're on, and, that's why I'm part of what I'm doing. I guess I didn't really fully put the pieces together, but I realized that using this media, and I'm developing an app as well, that's sort of, the idea is you're getting addicted to developing these habits. Like you're kind of checking in and you're saying, okay, these are the habits I have. These are the ones I want to change. And then every day, slowly but surely, you're changing them, but you're a rocket ship going through space, and you're fighting these asteroids and these meeting aliens and all this stuff. And the reason I'm doing it, because I use the word gamification, which is sort of tricking your lizard brain into wanting to learn and to take the actions that are good for you and will make you a happier person. But that's really, visual learning is a huge piece of that. And, on TikTok and Instagram, you're just going to see stupid cat videos falling off their chairs or whatever. But more and more there is type of stuff that we're doing, which is great, and it's allowing people to kind of have fun by watching and learning that way versus I don't think people have the capacity, less and less anyways, to sit in a classroom and read like they used to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, the social media world that we have at the minute is so instant. Everything is so instantaneous. So, we kind of live in an instant gratification world at the minute. And looking at it and using it all seems very simple, but there is a learning curve. And, sometimes learning is hard. And sometimes you have to fail. And sometimes it takes longer than an hour to pick something up. And I think the way the world is programmed now, everybody wants it yesterday. And I think that's a big part of the reason why a lot of, maybe not my generation, our generation, maybe the upcoming generation, they seem a little bit lost because they kind of have this thought pattern of it looks easy, so it should be easy. And in reality, things that look easy were once hard for someone to learn how to do. It's just that people don't have the time. They don't want to take the time to learn. And I think that's where that disconnection at the minute is really coming from, is people just genuinely wanting to give themselves time to actually learn how the process of something works, whether it's TikTok or whether it's changing your life. Like there is a time period that you have to give to it before it becomes easy.
That's a great point. And these short snippets, it's sort of like that's a way to kind of trick your lizard brain into sort of you're getting these little pieces of information, and hopefully, you're if you watch them enough, then it starts to sink in, and then you start to put it into practice in your real life. But I mean, you're right. Nobody wants to sit down and read a book anymore. I mean, I started all this. I've been writing a book for 25 years in terms of in college. When I had my similar moment where you had my epiphany, and it was it was a rock bottom moment for me, and I was suicidal, and I when I had this moment that kind of changed everything for me. Big picture, couldn't agree more. And then getting these short pieces of info, and then the book thing. So it's like I started. I was like, I'm gonna write a book one day, and I kind of just had slowly been over the years using myself as a human science experiment, writing down what works, what doesn't. I'm a crazy note taker, which is also part of my ADD.
But this is all part of it. Like I've done the same thing. I trained in a gym for 10 years, and most of that was just experimenting. Like what works, how many reps work. No, that doesn't work. Like I've got workbooks, like stacked.
Yeah, me too.
Like
nice. Me too. We should
full of notes and diet tips. And no, I didn't like that. I didn't like this. This gave me an upset stomach. Like I've spent so long taking notes about what works and what doesn't that I've got to the age of 35 and I just know what will work for me and what won't.
Right. And I like the way I like to look at that. And that's exactly what I've done as well. And I look at it in terms of there's these universal principles that are out there that have been around since the beginning of time, and they'll be around till we destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
But also we're all unique individuals, right? So you want to take these universal principles as the underlying base. Like you said, all right, universal principle is, your body's you got to get your body moving a certain amount of time each week. Then you go, okay, now how do I gamify that? What works for me? Okay, I love playing golf, or I love playing tennis or basketball or soccer. And so for me, it was basketball, a big part of my life. And I loved going to the gym and playing and I would just be drenched in sweat, dripping. I'd play for 2.5 hours. I'd come and then I'd work out afterwards. Because it actually gave me energy, especially when I would win. But at the competition, I got caught up in it all. And it didn't even feel like working out, right? And then I got my wife, who's the opposite. She doesn't really do that competitive sports, but she loves to she likes to go for a run and clear her mind. So everybody's different. So you got to figure out, okay, if I know I need to be moving for a certain amount of time each week, how do I do it to where I go, I really want to do this? This is fun versus forcing yourself, because willpower will always wear off.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm very much the same. Like the thing with me is I'm 0% or I'm 100%. So if I'm doing it to the best of my ability. And if I can't do it, then I don't even entertain it. And that's part of the reason why I stopped playing team sports, is because, like you said, the competition, the competitive streak would take over so much, it stopped being fun. Like playing football, it stopped being fun. Going out and playing with the boys on a Saturday or a Sunday, it stopped being fun because the competitiveness in me wanted to win so bad,
Right.
it overrode everything, the fun part of it.
And that's a great point, right? So, there's that side of it too, where competitive can help spur activity, but if you take it too far, right, and you're just focused on the winning and losing part, that's the key.
Yeah, and,
right. Like we tell our kids, just have fun. Well, it's easier said than done, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because it's in us to want to win. But again, if we use these things and we learn, and it's becoming aware of ourselves is what I'm always preaching, and I have this way to help people do that, just to kind of get rid of all this bullshit we're talking about in terms of these distractions and this the gratification world that we're living in, and more you can just literally click a button and get anything you want on this planet delivered, including yourself in a video down. And to me, it's about using these little tricks and figuring out ways to kind of personally gamify your own life and say, okay, how can I, so I know I'm competitive and I know I like playing basketball. So, all right, shit, I know I need to work out this week. All right, I'm going to proactively schedule, 2 or 3. And however that looks in your life. And people, it's so simple when you think about it. But people, and it's connecting to your, I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek, but connecting to your why, and to me, like I was saying briefly with willpower, like willpower is like this, you need to look at it as it's like a fuel cell that will always wear out. Like you can fight things for a while, but eventually your why, your internal core goes, no, that's not for us. Like I can force myself to run every single day. But eventually I'd go, I don't like this. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, the biggest question I get from clients is, Grant, how do I stay motivated? How do I get motivated? And I'm like, listen, motivation, I'll be honest, my motivation left me the day after I started. Like, I've been doing it for 10 years, but it left me the day after I started 10 years ago. It's not the motivation that keeps me going. It's the reason why I'm doing it. And, a lot of clients sit in front of me and, they come to me and they want me to give them this miraculous, magical theory of or a way of how it's all going to change their life. And all I do is ask them why they want to do it. Why? Right. If you don't know what your why is, then it's going to be very hard to keep it going, because the process of life in general is hard. Just waking up can be, just being a human is hard. Like, let alone relationships and work, and forget all of that. Just being a human is hard, right?
That's right.
So if you don't really have a why, if you don't really understand what your own why is for yourself, and this kind of ties into the whole world that we're in at the minute, where there's so many distractions. There's so many different ways to be distracted and put you in a direction of thinking, oh, well, that's my why. Oh, no, wait, that's my why. Oh, no, that's my why. A lot of people haven't really looked inward. And I think that for me is the bigger thing. Looking inwards and figuring out, regardless of what anyone else thinks or what anyone else says, what's the reason you're doing it?
Right. Totally. And so, and this goes, I was about to tell you, like, the way I help people to get through all this is I do this exercise. It's called Back to the Future. Because I was an 80s kid, and it's one of my favorite movies. And
I like it.
It's perfectly. So what you do is you go to flash forward to the end of your life. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this helps cut through all that BS, because it's like, okay, what's actually important to me, right? What's my why? And we all have slightly different things that matter most, and that we want basically said at your funeral. Like, okay, if you die and tomorrow, like, what would you want people to say? And I have this exercise where they do it in each of their cores, right? So it's not just in general, like, oh, he was a great, because it forces people in your mindset. Yeah. Like, he was a growth owner. He knew exactly who he was. And even though he had weaknesses and things that he wasn't naturally gifted at, like everybody else, he honed in on his strengths and what he was super passionate about. And he was able to, like, really laser focus on that and turn that into basically part of his everyday life, and he made his career out of it. And
Mhm.
he never, he looked at failure as a temporary roadblock and something to
Mhm.
learn from versus
Mhm.
something that's going to stop him in his tracks.
Mhm.
So he failed forward and he kicked ass, took names, and didn't stop and pivoted around until he was able to succeed and accomplish his goals, right? So that
Yeah.
would be an example of like, that's what I want somebody to say about me at my funeral about my mindset, right? And then you do that for each one: your career and finances, your relationships, your physical health, your emotional health, and
Absolutely.
giving back is a big part of it, right? And then you reverse engineer it. Then you come
Yeah.
back from the future to the present, and you go, okay, what are the habits I need to build? Because to me, it's
Yeah.
all about habits.
Yeah.
And what are the habits that will allow me to get to that point of what somebody's going to say about me? And you got to go small, because if you
Yeah.
try to do it all at once, you're screwed. And you just do one habit at a time, and you just kind of start picking away and say, okay, for me, for the physical health part, I want people to say this about me. He was, he always looked younger than he was, and he always had a ton of energy up until the day he died. Okay, what does that mean? How am I going to get there? Okay, it's eating habits, it's exercising habits. What does that look like? What are the habits? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's spot on, and it's great that you have that, because it really does force people to ask themselves the questions. Because I think at the end of the day, we're all searching for something, but it all starts with you. And
Right.
if there's something that's set up that makes you, I was fortunate in a way. I had a lot of good people around me, and I didn't realize what they were teaching me. And so now I've got to a stage in my life where I realize the lessons they were teaching me was indirectly getting me to ask myself the question of why I wanted to do it. So it's great that you've got a process that allows people to do that, because I think it's something that a lot of people are missing. I think a lot of people are missing that one bit of, help, or one piece of the puzzle that's missing.
Connecting the dots between,
Connecting the dots. Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely. Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
we were talking about earlier. Otherwise, what happens? You become your main
Yeah,
influencers are what decide your habits.
yeah,
And you're a victim being pulled in this direction and that, and
yeah.
this guy says to do that, or
Mm-hmm.
my parents said this, but then I
Yeah.
read this, and then people are confused. And then, right, I mean, to not have focus and to know clearly, like, and
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna change. It's not like one day you're gonna wake up and do this exercise and be like, okay, this is exactly what I want. Like, but
It's a daily thing.
it's a daily thing, and the more you do, the more you kind of set goals and be like, okay, this is what I think I'm really good at, and I really love. Like, I think this is where I want to be in 5 years,
Yeah.
or call it 3 years, and then you start, and then you maybe along the journey you go, okay, well, shoot, you know what, this path actually fits that a little bit better, and then you pivot,
Yeah.
and that's fine, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
set in stone, but as long as you're building your awareness every single day of the
Yeah.
type that you are and connecting to your why.
Yeah.
More and more, then that's how you're going to get to that finish line. By the way, I hate to break it to you people, there is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
I wish.
Right. But there are goals, and there's finish. As humans, we need to know that there's a finish line.
Yes.
Right. So just know that when you hit a goal, good on you. Then you reset to the next goal. Right.
Yeah.
Because growth is happiness. Right.
Yeah, and a lot of the time we hit goals and other doors open up as a result of putting in the hard work that got us there. We don't know what's going to be there when we get there, but more often than not, the amount of times I've said to myself, I want to get to this position, I get there, and just by getting there, something else happens as a byproduct of me staying consistent with the process. So I think the reason why a lot of people find it hard is because they think that progress is linear, and they think that getting there is a straight line, and it's
right.
anything but.
Yeah, it's anything but. And the sooner you realize that, like, when you do fail, it doesn't make you a failure, but it just means, and nobody's going to jump up and down for joy when they fail. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But if your mindset is such, like I was saying with the growth owner, I call it, where you go, okay, that sucked, but let me take a 10,000 step foot back, and what did I learn from that, so that I don't
Absolutely
make it again, so that I can now better get to where I want to go.
Absolutely.
And that's exactly right. Right. It's this long journey, and it's just one step at a time, just heading in that direction, and not taking no for an answer. So clearly you've been able to do that in your life. So Congratulations. Thank you so much for all the things you're doing. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about how people, and I'll have one more question before we wrap up, but how people can find you and get information on you and work with you.
Okay, so my Instagram is coached by GT. I'm actually in the middle of a whole complete restructure of my brand. A lot of my brand was heavily based off of my bodybuilding lifestyle. I'm not a bodybuilder anymore. I will never be a bodybuilder. I will leave that life where I left it. So I'm trying to keep everything together in terms of how my mind has developed across time now. So Coached by GT is my Instagram. Coached by GT is my Facebook, and Coached by GT is my Twitter as well. I don't have a YouTube set up. That's probably going to be coming not too far away. But yeah, those are my socials.
You know what? I tried to look you up before, and my assistant gave me the wrong.
No, do you know what it was? No, it's not that. It's this. See, this is my biggest thing, right? Is I'll have an idea and I'm straight into it. So a couple of days ago, I thought about the name that I was going to change my business to, and it was Coaching with GT.
Got it.
And I went straight in, bought the domain name, was already setting the website up. And then I sort of sat back and I was like, no, I don't really like that name. I think Coached by GT is better.
Yeah.
So then I literally went in, changed it all, bought another domain name. That's my biggest thing, is just being able to take it a step at a time. But I'm, like I said, I'm all in or I'm all out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I respect that. Right. I mean, you gotta love what you stand for, and you need to look at it. And I just went through a rebranding myself and website and everything, and holy shnikes.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
But then you can, once it's done, it's a really, again, there's one of those finite goals.
Yeah.
Okay. Got that out of the way. Check that box. Feels great. But one thing I was going to say, going back to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Yep. Right. We have this illusion. And that's part of what we were talking about earlier, where, in school, it's like, just work hard enough.
Yeah.
And if you make enough money, they don't actually say this, but that's basically what it is. Then that's the American dream, or whatever, the world dream, and you'll be happy.
Yeah.
But you look at, there's a reason that there's that show, The Lottery Ruined My Life. And you look at so I just took this course called The Science of Well-Being. It's also known as the Yale Happiness Course. I highly recommend it. It's on Coursera. It's free. They talk about a lot of these things we were talking about, like miswantings and stuff. And one of the things that, they talk about is how we're programmed to think that if we can only get, this amount of stuff, like this amount of salary. Actually, what's cool about the course is that they did actual studies. So it wasn't just like somebody talking. It was like, all right, Gene said 2018 did this study, and there's just study after study after study. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's proven without a shadow of a doubt that we want more by nature. And that actually goes back to Paleolithic days, because the more stuff you had, the better chances of being eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So, but now we're at this stage where society has changed to where being, greedy, or whatever you want to call it, or getting more stuff and having more, there's a certain point where if you're just chasing that, it levels off, and you don't become any incrementally happier. And in fact, there's actually they had a specific dollar amount. I mean, it's 4 years ago. I think it was $75,000, and that was for the U.S., where it was sort of like they literally did this study and they showed, people's happiness as they got to that point, which makes sense. It's like, that's an amount of money where, okay, you can have a house, you can have a car, you can have a family, and be able to support. You're not constantly worried about where's the next dollar coming from. But then it just showed how it just levels off, and people actually don't become happier as it keeps going up and up. And I just thought that was fascinating, because people are just, they think that dollar amount is correlated to their happiness.
Yeah, and it's crazy, because I never forget my first interview that I had with the gym that I eventually joined. Literally, I left the city and then had no money for a year and tried to build a client base and just struggled for that whole year. It was horrible. But I'll never forget the interview that I had with the manager at the time. And he looked at my CV, looked back at me, looked at my CV again, looked back at me and said, I can't give you a job because you're sat in front of me telling me that you want to do this because it makes you happy, not because of the money. And that it hit me hard, because my intentions were so pure. I was going in because I wanted to do really well at this. I needed a way in the front door. I knew this was going to be my opportunity. Yet there was a guy sitting opposite me saying to me he wasn't going to give me the job because he couldn't believe that someone who was earning that amount of money had just quit that job and wanted to earn 90% less. Like, that was the first sort of harsh lesson I learned on the world doesn't, you see the world one way,
Right.
and then there are people that see it a completely different way.
Well, right. And what's amazing too is when you do start seeing like these universal principles, like we were talking about earlier, when you do get one, you're like, all right, I can hang my hat on this one. Like, I know, like what you just said, like I know it's the right thing to do, to want to go into something because I want to and because I'm genuinely excited. Versus just doing it for money. And that clicks in you. And when you get that, and then it's like, to you it's so obvious, but you forget that other people don't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why we're both doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And
help others see it.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think, when it does click, I think your whole perception on life changes. Everything changes. How you communicate with people, what you buy. Like, I remember the days where I would walk into a shop and I wouldn't even sniff at a t-shirt that costs less than £50 or $60. Now I can happily wear a t-shirt from a charity shop. Like,
oh, I'm proud. The less I spend, baby, I'm proud. I'll go, hey, $2. Look at this guy.
Exactly. And
in fact, I think this is Costco, $10.
Yeah, it's actually an amazing thing, when you get to that point in your life where you realize that your happiness actually means more than how much money you earn. Because money, I can tell anybody watching right now, I came from no money and I thought that money was going to change my life, and it done the complete opposite. It's when I left all of that, then I got happy. And through happiness, you chase things that you're passionate about, and through that passion, you make money. Like, it's crazy. Like, the more you chase it, the further away it gets.
Well, and it's all relative, isn't it? So that's why grateful, that's a part of my morning routine, is to be grateful. I'm guessing you probably have some sort of a grateful piece in your life. Most people still do, right? Because what that does is it reminds you, like, that big picture of like, wow, how fortunate am I to have what I have, versus the keeping up with the Joneses, looking on Instagram and seeing, all these people that are may not even have this stuff anyways. Most of them putting it out there, and then that's when people start feeling bad about themselves. Like, why can't I do that? And then you get caught in that trap. And one of these studies, just to wrap up this part of the conversation, I mean, I could talk about this all day, but that Yale course was really interesting, where it showed people were interviewed and they said, you're making this amount of money right now. What amount of money do you think would make you happy? And if I remember correctly, people that were making 50,000 said that they wanted to make 75,000, somewhere around there. And people who were making 75,000 were like 125, and then people that were making like 100 said 250. So the more they were making, it actually incrementally went up. Yeah. But then they actually followed up with these people later, and some people had actually reached their goals, and they said, okay, well, do you feel like you said your happiness level would be here. Would you score yourself there? And they said, well, no. And they said, okay, well, where would you need to be? And they said, well, if I had this amount. And I knew all this, but when I saw that study, I was just like, boom. Gotcha.
And I was in that category, because I remember being a junior on like 15 grand a year, and all I wanted to do was get to 20. All I wanted to do was get to 30. All I wanted to do was get to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. And it never stopped. And then I got to a trading desk where the motivation every single day was, we have to make more money. And we'd make more money. And then we'd come in the next day and it was, we have to make more money. We have to make more money. And then the weeks would go by and you would realize that the more you earn, the more you want. The more you want, the more you spend. And the more you spend, the more you've got to worry about earning more money. Like, it's a complete cycle of just craziness.
They call it the rat race for a reason. Right. And then you're caught in that, and you're ignoring these other things. your physical health, your relationships, your emotional health, your mindset.
And it's crazy because, you know, I look back now, and when I was in it, I didn't realize that I was affecting family relationships or, you know, girlfriends relationships or friends relationships or colleagues relationships. I didn't realize any of that because I was so focused on, right, I've got to earn X amount of money because I'm going to get X amount of bonus and X amount of time. And yeah, it really truly is a rat race. Like it's crazy.
Oh God, I love it. Okay, so I always like to end with this question to my guests. So, you know, we talked about habits, we talked about gamification, how to gamify them. Again, my definition of gamifying your habits is sort of tricking your brain into wanting to take the action, connecting
Yes.
by understanding like
Why
you're doing this.
Yeah.
Is there a habit that you can think of that you've developed over time that is because maybe it started as a failure habit and it has become a success habit that's helping you build momentum every day?
Consistency. The one thing that I've built over time is consistency and having a understanding of the long term versus the short term. I think everybody's time period is skewed. How everybody sees time is skewed. So short-term goals, I always say to my clients, set me a short-term goal, set me a medium-term goal, set me a long-term goal. And their short-term goals are more often than not in weeks. And their long-term goals are in months. And I understand, and through consistency, I've learned that short-term goals are more like months and long-term goals are more like years.
Right.
So I think it's understanding how time and progress works. That's the one thing I've learned. And to enable that to happen, you have to be consistent. You have to show up every day, whether you want to, whether you don't, whether it's raining, whether it's not, whether it's summer, it doesn't matter what it is, you have to show up every day and you have to the best of your ability. Granted, some days we feel worse,
right?
You know, and some days we feel great, but you have to show up. And not quitting on yourself is the one thing that I've learned helps build consistency so much. Consistency is the most, for me, the most important part of all of it. Because if you can't be consistent, you never get any further.
Totally. And do you have a way that you are able to, like, do you have like a mantra or something, like a way to gamify that in terms of like making sure you remember that every day, or do you feel like it's just become part of you and you don't?
So my slogan's always been make changes, not excuses. And, you know, I think if you can do that, it pretty much sums up the path to consistency, because the easiest thing to do is make an excuse.
I love that.
Yeah. And, you know, I think the more you focus on changing and the less you focus on making excuses, the easier it is to become more consistent. And those changes don't have to be massive. You know, it could be from drinking more water to going for a walk. It doesn't have to be a massive change, as long as you're conscious that you're making it and not making the excuse not to do it. I think that's, make changes, not excuses.
I love that. I'm gonna write that down because it does. Like, and you know, the way I would gamify something like that is that either be part of my morning mantra, which I've memorized, or I'd have a reminder. I have a few things that I have reminders in my phone until I feel like I've really got it. Like when I come up with one where I'm like, I want this to be part of my everyday thinking process. Yeah. I'll like put a reminder in my phone and then it'll go off, and I have like 2 or 3 in the morning. You don't want to do too many because then you're overwhelmed. But I have 2 or 3 that I do throughout the day, and when they flash, I'm always like, yes. And then it just starts to sink in. So it's a full way to gamify, you know, what you're just saying in terms of like, all right,
absolutely,
this is what I live on, and then that it does. It just
day by day, hour by hour, week by week, month by month. It helps. It's, you know, it's just how we learn as humans. We have to, we you know, the more you look at something, the more you understand it. And I think the more you look at positive things and the more you look at things that are going to help you, the more help you'll get and the further you'll go in your process.
That's it, man. Well, Grant, this has been awesome. Thank you
so much.
I really, really enjoyed this.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll be cutting up snippets of this and the best of these.
Brilliant.
We're reposting, and then we'll also
Brilliant.
have our podcast. So
yeah, I need to get myself podcasting more, man. I need to do more of this stuff.
Get it going. Yeah, let me know if you need any help. I'm happy to help you with it.
I might make you my first guest, my friend.
I'd love it. All right, brother. All right, well, thanks
Brilliant.
so much, man. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much. We'll do.
All right.
Take care. Well, all the best.
That's it for the 5 Core Life. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like button on this video and pound that subscribe button so you get notified when new episodes drop. Also, please fill out the free 5 Core Life Evaluator quiz. It's a great way to get a baseline of where you are in the 5 cores and which of the 5 cores you need support. In addition, you'll get some actionable advice that you can apply and start improving your life in the areas that you need it most. That's it for today's episode of the 5 Core Life Podcast. Have a wonderful day.
Get moving. Gain momentum. Join the movement. Join Emmett by going to moremomentum.com to take a free life evaluator quiz on where you currently stand in each of your 5 cores.